12 out of 14 people didn't hear it, so we have to say it.
A guy sitting at a bar.
Okay, it's
And
recording.
he hears somebody.
He hears somebody saying, "Nice tie,
Nice tie.
nice shirt,"
Doesn't know where the.
and only the bartender is in the room. So he asks the bartender, "Who's saying that?" So the bartender says, "It's the peanuts. They're complimentary."
That's nice.
It's a hard one. You have to be good with the English language. It's like, what's complimentary mean? That would be a good one for my 7-year-old. She would sit and analyze it. What is complimentary?
Tea.
Okay, so talking about words, the Zohar is really a book about words. We're going to be talking about the Zohar. First, I'm going to give a talk about some particular areas in the Zohar, specifically about the idea of God, names of God. And then we're going to do some Zohar from the Parsha after that. So one of the big chidushim, one of the big ideas in the Zohar, is that when it says in the Torah, "Vayomer Elokim," and God said, "Yehi or," let there be light, it's not just an expression. Like, obviously that's a way of kind of saying God created the world. How are we going to say it? The Rambam says that it's a metaphor. Like, even when the Torah says God stretched out his hand, right? Does God have a hand? No. But it's a way of being able to convey a concept that people who are sometimes somewhat simple, they need to be given a way that their minds can kind of get around and grasp. So perhaps it's the same thing when the Torah says, and God said, "Let there be light." It's a kind of way of saying God created the world. We're never going to really understand it. It's a concept. The best we can do is just say God said. But the Zohar actually says this idea that God looks into the Torah and creates the world, or that the Torah is the blueprint for the world, which is that that words are actually the source of creation. And we know today through science that we have, for example, not just the naming of a specific element that would give a scientific name to, but that the very fabric of life, what we call the structure of life, the DNA, is really a certain type of code, so to speak. So to say that the idea that some kind of language, communication, which has a specific sound and a specific way of being bound together is part of the creative process, while it still sounds a little way out, and it is definitely out there, is not so foreign anymore. So that's one of the big ideas of the Zohar, is that creation takes place through words. What are the words? Lashon HaKodesh. One of the beautiful things about the Hebrew language, the Talmud points it out, is if you look at the actual letters of the Aleph base, the alphabet, the Aleph, the Beis, the Gimel, each one of these letters is almost like the equivalent of, whether it's respectively in each of the different languages, whether it's the hieroglyphs, which are little pictures, or I guess Mandarin, where you also have these very intricate symbols, where the letter is not just a letter, but it actually has a figure in it. It actually looks like something. The Gemara says Aleph Beis, for example, there's the Beis looks like a house. The actual Beis looks like the house. Gimel, Daled, the Gimel looks like somebody giving. The Daled looks like somebody receiving. Right? So those letters actually convey a sense of something that's happening. It's not just that they stand for something, but you can actually see it in the letters. And we're saying even more than that. So to understand that the Torah, what we have to then understand is that the Torah is the link between Creator and the created. And the Torah, why is it the link? Because it goes both ways. It allows, the idea of the Zohar, like other religious work that talk about the big picture, is that we want to understand why we're here, what our relationship is with God and the universe. And the dynamic link is the Torah. And it goes both ways. It's also God's way of saying, what is it that I want? What is it that I want to create? So he looks in the Torah and creates the world. But let me be a little bit more specific about the nature of words and names and tell you what the Zohar says. I'm going to read to you a few selections of the Zohar about this, a very important idea. The idea is that the entire Torah is really all God's name. So this section of the Zohar is in the second chelik, which the second chelik is Sefer Shemos. It's chelik 2 of the Zohar. It's on Daf 124 B, right? Chuf Chav Daled on Beis. It's in Mishpatim. So, the Zohar says, the Zohar says the following thing, that we have learned that the entire Torah is the name of the Holy One, blessed be He. Whoever works, meaning whoever studies the Torah, it's as if they study the name of the Holy One. Because the entire Torah is one name of the Holy One. An exalted name, a name that includes all the other names. And therefore somebody who takes out one letter of the Torah, it's as if they made a blemish in God's holy name. This is, I'm quoting word for word from Zohar. I was translating, but it's a direct quote. We have learned, and the names of other gods you shall not mention. Do not add to the Torah, do not remove from it. That's the end of the quote of the Zohar, what I wanted to quote from that section from Mishpatim. See, one of the things that we have to right away explain in the Zohar is going to introduce, and we're going to do this in another lesson, on what are the various names of God. Because everybody knows, for example, we have the name Yud Ke Vav Ke, right? The Yud, that's the most known, famous, transcendent name of God. We also have the name Elohim. I'm not pronouncing them fully out of respect that we only pronounce them fully when they're being said in their contexts, when you're leading the Torah or davening or so on, or even just reading the whole verse, not just part of the verse. You have lesser known names, right? Besides those are the two most, you have we pronounce the Yud Ke Vav Ke with Aleph Daled and Nun Yud. Adnus we call it. Adon. We have the Kel, which is Aleph and Lamed, right? I'm not pronouncing the Aleph. That's another name. That often goes with the name Shin and Daled Yud. They go together, or they can go, the Kel can be on its own. There are names, for example, when Moses asked God, what do I tell the people? How are they going to know that you've actually designated, you've actually selected me and picked me? How will they know that it's true? So he said, tell them, Aleph He Yud He Eya. It's the name of God, Shalchani Aleichem. This name of God sent you to me. So there are these different names. And then there's the Kinuyim, we call them. The Kinuyim are like Chanun, Verachim, that God is, they're attributes of God, but they're designations that even though they're not talking about a certain transcendent level of God, they're still godly attributes, and therefore they're holy, yet they're not as holy. So they're called the kind of this intermediate state. They're called the 7 nicknames of God. Chanun is that he is gracious. Rachum is compassionate, and so on. In addition to these names, the Zohar adds a whole, you might have heard the 42-letter name of God. And there's a variety of these names that the Zohar adds in, which, again, we have to have a special session just to really go through these names and what they signify. But the first thing, so the truth is, the entire Torah is really a series of God's names. And the various names of God are communicating with each other, interdivine communication. And we, because we have the name of God, is connected to our inner being, because it says, God created us in His image. We are part of that interdivine communication. And when we understand that, the Zohar takes us back into various verses of the Torah and sees how it is that Moses, for example, because he's the most famous of the prophet, is actually speaking down to one of God's names because he's the husband of that name. Not that you should, God forbid, ever speak down to your wife. Not that anybody would even think of doing such a thing. But, okay, like there's in a heated discussion, you're like, come on, so that idea plays out in many sections of the Torah where there is a communication between, there's the three-way play between one name of God, the prophet that's interfacing, communicating with that name of God, and another name of God. This gets a little bit confusing. This sounds